I live in the real world. And if my boss is Sam, and Sam says, Clint, I want to get that done in, 10 days instead of the 20 you're asking for. I'm not going to be successful. I'm just going to beat myself up and I'm going to work 20 hours a day and still going to fail in the end. I really got to start digging into it. But that's only if you can see your piece of it. This is also where the team comes in because I want to create an environment as a project manager where people are willing.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honored today to be joined by Clint Padgett. Clint is the president and CEO of Project Success Inc. and is the author of two books, The Project Success Method and his latest book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment. And this brings up a interesting dichotomy for me at the Leadership Project, this balance between leadership, where we want to inspire people into meaningful action because they want to do things, and to give them the empowerment to manage their own decisions and to get on with things. And this balance with project management, where we've also got to coordinate a team towards a common goal. We've got critical path to manage. We've got tasks and milestones that need to be met. So both can live together, but it is a balancing act. And that's what we're going to explore today with Clint. And there'll probably be some things that we unpack along the way. So, Clint, without any further ado, I'd love it if you would introduce yourself. And I'd love to know a little bit about your background and what inspired you to go into this world of project success and to develop the project success method.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate that. I grew up in the U.S. in the south of the U.S. My dad was a serial entrepreneur, so what that really means, he started and failed at a lot of different businesses. I love my dad, but uh, it was interesting growing up that way for sure. Um, so I thought I would just punch a clock my whole life, and that was, because I wanted the stable paycheck and not what we lived like when I was a kid, where it was all up and down based on how the business was going. And right out of high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. So I joined the Navy, spent 6 years in the Navy, got out of the Navy, went to work in a shipyard. And there's probably no greater motivation to go to college in the world than to work in a shipyard in Norfolk, Virginia in December and January, which is exactly what I was doing. You're walking into the shipyard, which is on the water, of course. The wind is coming off the water, slicing right through you. I'm laying in the bilge of these boats running cables because I was an electrician's mate at the time, which is an electrical person. And I remember this is when I discovered my first law of thermodynamics, which is I was not a big enough heat sink, and all the heat was radiating out of my body into the hull of the ship, sitting into the water. So after 2 months of that, I thought, maybe college is a pretty good idea. So I was lucky enough to get accepted to Georgia Tech, where I went and got an electrical engineering degree from Georgia Tech. My first job post college, I walked across the street to Coca Cola. So if you've ever been to Atlanta, Georgia, Georgia Tech's on one corner or more than one corner nowadays, and the Coca Cola's on the opposite corner. So I spent about 6 years at Coke in the engineering group in cold drink technology, where we developed new drink equipment. In 1994, the city of Atlanta got awarded the 96 Olympic Games. That seemed like a really interesting project that I really wanted to work on. Wasn't going to be able to do that as an electrical engineer at Coke. So what I did was I left the company on a Friday, went back to work on a Monday for a company called Project Success, and I got to work on the Olympic project. And then 30 years later, I'm still doing all the Olympic projects for Coca-Cola. I work on all the FIFA World Cups, Summer Winter Olympic Games, and also all the Euros. Anytime they have a major worldwide sporting event, I'm one of the people they call in to help plan those efforts. So a rather circuitous route of how I got here. And ironically, along the way, even though I did not want to be an entrepreneur, the opportunity did come up about 20 years ago to buy the company that I was working for. And I took that opportunity and was able to buy it from the retiring owner. So I've been here 30 years with the company. 2/3 of that is the owner, 1/3 was just working my way up the food chain, so to speak.
Yeah, well done, Clint, and congrats on your success. There's a side observation I'll make there about the life of the entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are very purpose driven and they're very focused on what they want to achieve. There's always a family behind that. And for a entrepreneur to be successful, it's a supportive family, but it's also the roller coaster of the entrepreneur. The family's feeling it as well. Yeah, right. So really interesting
Absolutely.
situation there. Now tell me, like, on projects and project success. So first of all, this concept around the Olympic Games, that's pretty much the definition of a project that has an immovable deadline, right? So it's going to be a good reference point for some of the conversation that we have today. What specifically about project management inspired you, or was it that you were falling in love with the Olympic movement, or was it project management that caught your attention?
So it ended up being a perfect storm, Mick. What happened was, as a young engineer at Coca-Cola, we had a project that went really, really badly. And I write about this in my second book, but it was called the Magic Can Project. And I won't go through all the gory details, but basically it was a failed project. And we said, we have to get better at this. And so we brought in this company called Project Success. And I took a course called the Project Success Method, which is the topic of my first book, actually, from the original owners who came up with the process. We used it. We saw great benefits from it. So I love the process. I really did. I love doing it. Really appealed to me as an engineer. The logic based side kicked in because if you follow critical path method, you know there's logic involved and there's math involved, which I've always loved math. And then the other part that I like though is the more I got into it was the people side. And one of the strong benefits I would say that I got, so there's certainly negatives. I kind of hit on them, paycheck to paycheck when your dad's a serial entrepreneur. But on the positive side, you're forced to work with people. And so that made me, maybe I already had it, I don't know, but helped develop some people skills. And I got to get along with people and really be able to talk to anybody about anything at any time, which is good in project work. So that was part of the perfect storm. And the other part was I really wanted to try to work on the Olympic Games. When I was at Georgia Tech as a student, I had also worked on the Georgia Tech Olympic Committee, which was the committee that would go out and would greet the people when they would come to Atlanta as we were trying to win the bid. We'd be out there with balloons and clapping and, really trying to make the superstars feel welcome when they came to visit the city and hoping to get the game. So it all kind of came full circle for me. It was a perfect storm.
Yeah, I love it. All right, well done. And it's good when you can have that alignment, something that um, keeps you motivated professionally, and then the end goal is something that you can be proud of, and those moments of, oh wow, we did that, and on this case, we did that on the world stage, and well, Atlanta was already on the map, but let's say really brought Atlanta into the homes of millions or billions of people around the world. And yeah, great success. And I'm sure you must have been very proud. So let's talk about this, get into this dichotomy. You already brought up two words that are interesting, people and process. And I could add technology in there as well because we use tools, etc. So people, process, and technology, the famous trifecta and the triangle of that. So let me set the scene for a second, Clint, and then let's see where we go from there. So in a project management world, let's say a very purist project management world where I sit down with Microsoft Project or P6 or whatever, and I come up with the perfect project, nothing happens because without people, the tasks don't get done, nothing gets shipped. So you can have a perfect project on paper and no action. And then equally at the other side, if you just go, oh, I just need people and you've got no coordination, you'll just have people running in all kinds of direction and you'll have chaos and a big mess. You might have little pockets of success here or there, but it won't be coordinated in a common direction. So how do we balance this world of pure perfection project management on paper versus bringing it to life with people, and this balance between people having the autonomy to do things their way and off they go in all kinds of directions.
So I have a great analogy for that. I have something we call shifting the worry curve, which I think will help describe the two options we have then. One is we have a project where I'm working at a company, let's say it's Acme Corporation, and here at Acme Corporation, we have no formal planning process. Business unit vice president calls a meeting and says, here's the project. You guys all know your jobs. Go make it happen and call me if there's a problem. So you walk into the kickoff meeting, you already have 5 projects on your plate, right? You're already doing 5 things and they're in various stages of completion. Some are just starting, some are in the middle, and hopefully some will be closing out soon. And then 30 minutes later, you walk out having been assigned to project number 6. There's no plan. There's no plan to get a plan. You know 2 things. You know you're on the team and let's say you've got 6 months or a year to get it done. That's what you know. And what happens is when I walk out of that kickoff meeting, if I'm the average team member, my level of worry is probably pretty low about this project because I'm more worried about the other five projects, which I have a lot of knowledge of, right? So we call this first phase uninformed optimism. I don't know anything about the project other than that I'm on the team and I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm pretty sure I can get it done. But I got five other projects I've been getting beat up about for quite some time that I need to worry about. And I'm going to get to this. I'm confident in my abilities. I'm confident that I'll be able to get it done. I'm in the uninformed optimism stage. I don't know enough to be scared yet. And then about halfway through the project, my level of worry begins to rise about this project. And while I was pretty sure I could get everything done in a year, I'm not as certain I can get it done in only 6 months, and that's all I've got left yet. This is where you see your team members walking down the hallway, and you hope they don't bring up the project. And if they do bring up the project, you hope they also haven't worked on it because you haven't worked on it. And let's be honest, we know it's okay if I'm late as long as somebody else is more late. That's what I'm really hoping is somebody else more late than I am, right? So we call this phase vague concern. My sense of foreboding is rising. My stomach tells me I'm in trouble. My spidey sense is tingling, saying something is wrong, but I don't have a plan to measure it against, so I can't prove that I'm late. I just got this bad feeling that I'm late. And then, of course, we move into the third and final phase of the project, which is panic. And I like the word you used earlier, chaos. Projects are chaotic, and I often joke that the the subtitle of project manager should be called the theory of chaos because all you're trying to do in project work is you're trying to wrangle the chaos into something you can actually work with and semi control to get it across the finish line. But in the panic phase, we find that three things happen. Costs, of course, rise because the only way to get things done is to throw money at the problem. And usually, when you find the problem, it's late in the game. The only option you have left is to do stupid things, which I've seen done, like air freight concrete block to a construction site. Incredibly expensive, but less than the opportunity cost of not opening the hotel on time. Now, what would have been better is to truck ship and still open the hotel on time. But you do stupid things when you get caught in the panic phase. Also, quality suffers in the panic phase. All these great ideas you had about full color videos and training before the rollout of the launch, that all goes out the window. And suddenly, here's a black and white photocopy and just read this and let me know if there's any questions, or we'll do a training after the fact. So your quality suffers. And not only is the project expensive financially, but it's also expensive emotionally because in the panic phase of the project, you lose really talented people. So that's an example of process where you're letting process drive things. You're not really focusing on the people side. What we try to do is take the opposite approach. And we want to get everybody, we want to bring them all together in a room for 2 or 3 days and plan the project out in a collaborative way. Because what I need to do is I need to pull people out of their silos and force them to have what you and I are having right now, which is a conversation. I'm a big fan of conversation. Communication is can be one-sided, and I want a conversation which is a dialogue where we can ask follow-up questions and really understand what the intent of the project is or what the intent of your tasks are, et cetera. So now what we do is bring everybody together in a collaborative way. In just 2 or 3 days, we can actually plan the project out. I understand you're part of the project, and I can see how if I'm late, it's going to impact you, vice versa. I can see where we fit in the overall span of things. I can see that I'm in the first month of the project. I might think there's no way that if I'm late by a few days, it could possibly impact the end of the project a year from now. But once I do the plan and I'm part of it, I see how it's all fit together. I go, oh, wait a minute. So Joe over here, he could be a day late. Doesn't matter because he's not on the critical path, but I am. And if I'm late, even though it's a year from now, we're going to be late. And so now what you're doing is you're bringing people into the mix. You still have your process, but now you're bringing people in. And together, that's how you're going to be successful in project work is by focusing on both process and people.
Yeah, I love it, Clint. So what I'm hearing here is if we don't go through a process like that, that we have these phases, and I like the way that you describe them, the uninformed optimism, then the vague concern through to the panic. And yes, that's a very regular thing. What I loved about you bringing people together is then that's going to drive buy-in. People feel invested at that point. You're also going to have the opportunity there where you're going to have the collection of very bright people in the room, and the project manager doesn't have all the answers. They don't know the best way to do this project. But if they ask the right questions and everyone's focused on what the goal is, you can share ideas together. And then there's the understanding of the connection between each other. So whether it's the critical path element or even just critical dependencies. That here I am working on this task, but I now know that Joe down the corridor is waiting for me to finish that task because he can't even do his task until I'm done. So critical path and critical dependencies at that point. So tell me more about that process and the ideation process. So when you're bringing people together, how do you make sure that we're holding space for the best ideas on how to execute the project are coming into the plan?
So that's actually one of the powerful things about bringing people together as well. Is I kind of mentioned this earlier. I need to turn you. Let's say Mick, you and I have worked together for 5 years, but you're in Tasmania and I'm in Atlanta, right? So we're never going to walk down the hallway and see each other. And I know you as Mick at Acme Company, acmecorporation.com. And I know that when I do my task, I email it to you and you do some magic and the company eventually makes money and everybody's happy. But you're just one of 6 projects that I'm working on at any given time. And this week, it's Friday afternoon. I was supposed to get my task done today for you. It's Friday afternoon at 6 o'clock. I've already put in 60 hours this week. I'm tired. It's not like I've been sitting around doing nothing. I did my part. It's just I ran out of time. And I don't really feel that bad because I put in 20 hours extra this week. It's not my fault. My boss gave me more project work than I could possibly do. And so I just, I don't do your task. And then Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week, I finally get a chance to finish it, send it to you and say, hey, Mick, sorry it's late. Hope you're doing well, mate. And that's it. And then I just think everything's great because the project eventually gets crosses the finish line and the company makes money and everybody's happy. But then when we come together and we're in a room, I get to meet you on a regular. I get to see you at lunch or on a coffee break or over a breakfast, and I get to learn a little bit about you. And I learn maybe you have a kid, and he's saying his name is my son, and your kid plays softball or baseball. My kid plays soccer, and we start to learn more about each other. And what I'm really doing is I'm changing you from an email address that I really have no accountability to, into a living, breathing human being to which I now begin to feel accountable. I'm going to hold myself accountable. And so over a lunch, or we're chatting, we're getting to know each other. We go back into the room and we're looking at the critical path. And I know we really haven't really defined what that is, but basically to make it easy, the critical path is a set of activities in your project that if they're late, you're going to miss your deadline. That's really what they are. They're a connected series of activities. And I look at it and go, wait a minute, Mick, this says that I'm on the critical path, and that can't be right because if that was true, when I'm late, you would be late. But I know for a fact on that last project, I was about 2 or 3 days late, and we still finished the project on time. And you say, well, Clint, you're right. You were late. I remember vividly. It was 3 days because I had to work 2 weekends to make up for your lateness. And I know that Clint is a 5-letter word, but in my household, for 2 weekends in a row, you were a 4-letter word because I had to miss 2 big events in my kid's life. I missed this major baseball tournament and my daughter's recital because I had to work those 2 weekends to make up for your lateness. Well, I start feeling bad because I mean, look, I got 2 kids. I would hate for you to have made me miss a big event in my kid's life. So when I go back to Atlanta and you go back to Tasmania, you're still Mick at acmecorporations.com, but you're Mick that I don't want to let down. So now what I've done through this having this meeting is I've made you a living, breathing human being for which I feel accountable now. And nobody can put that on me. We kind of talked around it early, but as a project manager, most of us today work in a matrix organization, which means I don't own the people on my team. I can't make anybody do anything. We're networked. They don't report to me. They report to their direct supervisor who gives them pay raises and reviews. And yet somehow I've got to take this project for which I control nobody and get it across the finish line on these what I feel like are arbitrarily too short, deadlines. And how do I do that? Well, I do that by having people hold themselves accountable. And we do that by forming connections, and we do that through collaboration. And so the reason we like to bring people together is we find even in as short as 2 or 3 days together in a face-to-face environment, we can do a 2-year project remotely as long as we have those first 2 or 3 days together to really form those connection points.
Yeah, I love that. And you're gonna find those connection points is a good word, and to know and like each other and build a little trust with each other as well. But then to know that when I am late, it's not just impacting a Gantt chart and a bit of software. It's impacting a real human being who's got a life and a family that wants to spend time with them. It's really good. And what you said was really interesting is that if I'm late frequently and I never feel the impact of that, there's no incentive for me to do better next time.
Yeah, I don't even know the negative impact I'm having. All I
Mm.
know is I finish it and it seemed to be okay in the end. I didn't know that poor Mick had to work 2 weekends in a row. I didn't see that. So that's another reason we like the collaboration piece, and we also follow that up with biweekly meetings. At least once a week, if not every 2 weeks.
Mm.
We have our update meetings where we talk about what actually did happen as opposed to what was supposed to happen. And then we find out that Clint was late. What can we do so Mick doesn't have to work 2 weekends in a row to make up for this lateness? Is there somebody after Mick that can we outsource that task and have it done faster? And so together again in a collaborative way, we work together as a team to really get the project done on time. That's why I say it's how teams triumph. It's managing by commitment. It's because I'm not managing you by commitment. You're committing to me to get stuff done. You're committing, you're holding yourself accountable and you're committing to your teammates and they're going to hold each other accountable plus themselves.
Yeah, this word commitment and where you're going with it, the people element of commitment. Like, so I'll be really open with you here, Clint. When I look at your title of your book, How Teams Triumph Managing by Commitment, it instantly did capture my attention. But my brain went to commitment to the cause, commitment to the project, commitment to the business. But what you're saying is commitment to each other, that you're in this together. And I'm committing to you, Clint, that I'm going to get this to you by Thursday, 2 o'clock. So you can do your thing by Friday, 5 o'clock, and then go fly fishing on the weekend with your kids or whatever you do, whatever your passion is, baseball, whatever. So it's the
Exactly.
commitment to each other. Yeah.
Yes. It's really important, the people side of things. We were joking earlier when you were first starting off the call and you did something with your hands, little balloons came up and people often ask me, well, are you worried about AI taking over your job? And not as long as Billy, Bob, and Sue are doing the work. I don't think AI can do that because it's about commitment and holding yourselves accountable. And I just don't think the computer can do that. I think that's people. And there's a
Yeah.
connection point that's I think really critical to getting work done.
Yeah, it's really good, Clint. Now, one of the other interesting things you brought up along the way is in most organizations, not every, in most organizations, there's also this portfolio effect that you talk about. So I might be on a team with you, but I might be on three other projects where I'm on three other teams. There's a management element of that, of how do we do resource allocations and balancing workload, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's a human element of that because then I might be in a situation where I'm not wanting to let you down, Clint, but I'm also got two other projects that are waiting for me to do something by the end of the week. How do we balance the fact that I'm not just committing to you, a human being, I'm committing to other human beings on other teams that I'm on?
That's a great point. And I think this is where the process can come back in and help. So for those of us who don't know about traditional project management, critical path method, as I was saying, the critical path is a set of activities in your project that have to be done as planned time wise, or the project will be late. And what we found in our 40 plus years of doing this is about 10% of the activities in a project, roughly, will be on the critical path. What that really means is that 90% of them can be late by a day, a week. We don't know. I mean, we do know in the software, but they don't have to be done perfectly as planned. They can there's some flexibility in that, right? If you use a Microsoft project, it's called Slack. If you're using P6, then it's called Float. But there's some flexibility in getting that stuff done. So this is where the process comes in. So now what happens is I can give Mick a list of all of the tasks across all four projects, the three that you're working on plus mine, right? And you in any given slice of time, you can say, these are all the things on my plate. And then we can look at that flexibility and say, well, look, there's 33 things to be done this week, but 25 of them can be pushed to next week or even longer. Here are the 8, though, that really need your attention across all of them. And then what we can do is say, if you can only do 5 of those, I need to solve the problem for 3 now. And how can I do that? Another thing is the process comes back in and we're going to, because you did commit to getting something done, but then maybe one of those other 3 projects blew up, or the boss comes in and says, hey, we got this customer issue, super critical. You need to go focus on solving this customer issue, which means your project work is going to start to slip. So I am going to hold you accountable, but we also have to have a ground rule that says you can change your answer later if you get better information. In other words, you committed to get it done by Thursday before your boss pulled you off on this customer issue. Okay, so I'm going to hold you accountable to Thursday, and you're going to come in and say, Clint, I won't get it done by Thursday because I'm actually, and next week I'm going to be in Melbourne. and I'm going to be out of pocket. I won't be able to work on this at all until I get back. Okay, so we'll put that in and we'll say, when can you get it done then? And maybe you're one of those tasks that couldn't be late. So, okay, you can't fix it because your boss pulled you off. If there's nobody who can do it for you, then we look at all the people after you in the plan and say, we need help. We need 3 days. How can we get these 3 days back? Is there something that we can do in parallel? Maybe it's not as efficient, but that'll help solve the problem. Can we outsource it? Is there somebody else that maybe isn't as good as Mick, but he has availability, she has availability, Mick doesn't have? So as a collaborative team, yet again, we solve the problem through process and through people.
So the key thing there is the communication. I'm going to say almost the safety as well, to stick up my hand and say, oh, hang on a second, this is not working. And to do so early, because if we don't do so early, you're not going to be able to make those adjustments that you said. It'll be already too late. We've already hit
That
the
was
critical path.
perfect. Thank you so much for saying that, because that's an excellent, that's one of the things I always try to hammer on is don't shoot the messenger. I want to create an environment as a project manager where people are willing to tell me the truth. I know that in a project of any size or complexity, if things aren't going wrong, then I'm being lied to, because things are going to go wrong in a project. That's just how projects work, right? Things don't go as planned. I have a series. It was a real story, but when my first child was born, my wife said, "When are you coming home?" And I said, "When's the due date?" She said, "It's June 13th." I said, "I'll be home on June 12th." And she goes, "That's not how this works." She goes, "This is not a, this is not a project where you can just come in on the day." I said, "But that's the due date." And so I came home a week early and the kid was born a day late. So, but things don't go as planned, right? So that's just how life works. And I want to create an environment. I like the way you said it because it's so important. I want to create an environment where people are willing to tell me the truth, because the earlier that I know the bad news, the more time we have to resolve it. If you wait, because it's human nature to do this, human nature is to say, I got this problem, but I just think I can fix it. And rather than get everybody all upset and get everything, and let me just see if I can't go fix it on my own. But we know that almost never happens.
Yeah.
And so what would have been better is telling me early. So I tell people all the time, I'm willing to take bad news. I'm okay with it. What I'm not okay with is bad news you've known about for weeks or months that I'm just finding out about today, because that is exactly how, and this is a real project as well. We had to air freight concrete block to a construction site because somebody thought they were going to fix the problem, rather than just saying early on, I got a problem. Here's what it is. But to that person's credit, maybe their whole history of project work, when they did it in the past, they just got pummeled and they got blown out of the water, and their boss was told this guy is not doing his job. Well, you know what? Then I'm going to try to fix it without letting anybody know. So we have to create that environment where people feel safe, that they
Mm.
can tell the truth and we don't just beat them up. Now, if the same person is always going to be bad news, and that's maybe I got to pull them aside and say, hey, maybe you got some rough spots here we need to solve. But in general, I want to create an environment where people are willing to tell me the truth.
Yeah, yeah, really good. So interesting one there, and that would be around this concept that sometimes in the culture people feel like and coming back to their emotions again, that sticking up their hand and asking for help is a sign of weakness, whereas it's actually, for us, it's a sign of strength. It's a sign of strength for them to say, hey, there's something wrong here, I need help. It should be encouraged, not the opposite. If they're always dropping the ball, there might be a performance issue that needs to be addressed, but generally it should be encouraged, not discouraged. I want to go to another phenomenon that often happens in these organizations, Clint, around this word commitment. I want to go to a potential negative here, is you end up with that someone that gets that personal commitment. They don't want to let anyone down. And you turn around and you find that they're working 16-hour days, which is not healthy for anyone. It's not even good for their performance, because if they're working those
Ultimately, no.
hours, they're actually going to become less productive, not more productive. They think they're being productive because they're putting in the hours, but in reality, they're progressively slowing down, and they're also, the quality of their work is suffering. How do we also make sure that when they do commit to each other, that they're also committing to look after each other and look out for each other?
So it falls on two different groups. One, of course, is the project manager for that particular project, but they're not going to have the visibility necessarily into all the different work that's going on. They're only going to see their one project or maybe their two projects this person is involved with. So one way we can see that is if that person has traditionally been a rock star and been pretty good about getting their work done on time, but then they start to slip. and one or two, not a big deal. It's life. But if it happens more and more often, that's where you got to pull them aside and say, hey, Joanne, normally you're really rock solid on your deadlines. And so, what's happening here? You got too much on your plate. You really got to start digging into it. But that's only if you can see your piece of it. This is also where the team comes in, because maybe two or three people are also on those other five projects with Joanne. And somebody should be raising the flag saying, hey, she has way more on her plate than she could possibly do. But you'll see this in the meetings. And this is really helpful when you do have the empathy and you can actually see if you're able to read people. The same person who at the beginning of the project was super energetic and go, go, go. And then all of a sudden they don't come to maybe miss a couple of meetings, or you can read it on their face. They're distracted or they're frustrated or they just look tired. And that's when you got to have a side conversation and say, hey, what can I help you with? Because that's really the job of the project manager. Isn't he or she's not doing physical work. They're there to support the team and make sure the team has what they need to be successful. And part of that is how you feeling, how you doing. And maybe it's just having conversations that random conversation, maybe every other Tuesday, I pick a different person that I talk to offline outside of the meeting, go, hey, just give me 5 minutes. I know you're super busy, but I just wanted to check in with you. Hey, what's going on? How's your son's this, your daughter's that, or what's going on? And just chat with them. And should be able to pick up on if they really are overwhelmed or not.
Yeah, yeah. Well done, Clint. Now, one of the things that I love about doing the show, in fact, it's probably the number one thing I love about doing the show, is I feel very blessed that I get to have a front seat audience with a expert in their field and get to ask questions that have plagued in my mind for a while. So I'm going to ask one about this. You mentioned before about the superstar, and we've got this person that is the best at topic X. It might be some kind of data structure or architecture, or they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. And they become the go-to person that every single project manager wants allocated on their project. And whenever a tricky task comes up, they're always the person that gets it. But what I've always been struggling with that concept, although it achieves results, is it then limits the capacity of the business. If the same person does the same task every single time and becomes the go-to person, it's robbing other people of the opportunity to learn and grow and to also build that skill and may become the future superstar of that task. How do we balance with project managers who just want to get their project done and want to come in under budget and deliver to their customers' delight and deliver on time? There might be this element that we need to invest in our people, and to give that task that the superstar would have taken 1,000 hours to do, but they say more person with their L plates on, or I don't know if that translates into the US, but learner plate, the more junior person that's still developing,
Mhm.
that might take them 1,600 hours to do, but it's an investment in the future of the business. How do we balance that?
So as a project manager, selfishly, of course, I want the superstar, right? Because I know they're going to do it well, they're going to do it right. Even under pressure, they're going to deliver. So of course I want that. But if I put my business hat on and say, what's better for the organization, not just my one project, but the organization as a whole that needs to be successful if I'm going to have a continued employment and we're going to do well in the universe, right? So then what happens is, and it actually does help because as a project manager, if I go to Sue and say, Sue, how long will this take you? And she goes, well, it's probably 40 hours to get that done. Then I say, okay, well, this is not your only task though, right? So how available are you? She goes, oh, I'm available about 25%. So I can give you 2 hours a day of my availability. It's all I got for you on this project. So you take it and you divide her 40 hours required by her 2 hours available. And her duration is say 20 days, right? But there's actually maybe the junior person will deliver faster because they're more available. So you
Mm.
go to Fred and you say, "Hey, Fred, I know you've never done this before, but what do you think it would take you?" And Fred says, "I don't know. If Sue said 40, give me 80, double it." Okay, well, how available are you? He says, "Well, I'm brand new. I can give you all of my time." So 8 hours a day of availability, it means he can get it done in 10 days rather than 20 days. So selfishly, it's actually better for me because the junior person has more availability. And what I maybe do is I say, okay, well, Fred, you're going to do it. But Sue, what I need you to do is maybe every week, just check in with him just to make sure that he's on track, doing what he's doing. And that will take some things off your plate and it'll put more on Fred's plate. So it kind of leverages or balances out the workload. But
Yeah.
you have to think about it in advance.
Yeah. Nice mindset, Clint. Okay, we touched on flexibility and agility a little bit before as well, and I'm going to completely butcher this quote, but a strategy only lasts an hour in the heat of battle. It's roughly that. I can't remember it exactly, but you said it yourself. There's no such thing as a perfect project. There's all kinds of things can happen. Circumstances change. They might even be scope changes from the client or all kinds of things that happen. So how do we, when the scheduler on the project might want to have this pristine P6 or project, etc., and imagine that everything goes perfectly every day, but we know it just doesn't happen. So how do we cope with flexibility and agility with the team that started off with a good plan, but the plan didn't last more than a week without having to chop and change a little?
That's actually one of the things we have to say going in is, listen, I'm asking you to predict the future and you don't have perfect knowledge. Nobody does. I'm asking you to give me a duration for a task that's 9 months in the future. And you won't actually know how long it's going to take until you figure out what's happening in the next 2 months, because that's going to drive the way you attack what happens in tasks 9 months from now. So we know there's variability. Anybody who thinks you're putting together the plan that's perfect is not realistic. So we know that the plan we come up with in day one is a good plan. It's the best thing it's our best guess today for a future complicated set of activities to deliver something a year from now. What that means is that we have to come back every so often, and we're going to say it's either every week or every other week. I wouldn't go any more than every other week. That's at least every 2 weeks, if not every week. And we need to make the plan accurate again. So you said it was going to take you 5 days, but did you finish it? No. You got pulled up on a customer issue. Okay. So when will you be done? Or what do we know today that we didn't know a month ago when we first planned this project? What have you learned? I've seen a situation where it was just almost like a check mark. We had to get this test run. We'd never not passed this test, but this time we didn't pass that test. We had not planned for that. So okay, we didn't plan for that. We failed the test. What new steps do we need to add to resolve this issue? And we make these modifications based on what's actually happening versus what's planned, new knowledge that we've gained since we last met, something we didn't see coming, like maybe the factory burned to the ground, or all the real life stuff that happens. Joanne got sick and was out for a period of time. We didn't expect that to happen, or who knows? There's all these life happens, right? And so we have to make those corrective actions in the plan of what's really happening. And then we let the software do what it's good at, which is do all the math and say, when are we going to be done? And the software will tell you very quickly in seconds that as a result of all the changes you just made, we're now going to be a month late. And these are the set of activities making us late. And then again, we look at the team and go, guys and gals, how are we going to fix it? We need a month. Here are the 35 activities that we need to get a month out of. What are we going to do? And anybody that's on that set of activities, their decisions can help us solve that problem. So to me, it's about going in with the mindset that I don't have to be perfect because I can make changes later. I've got time to do that. And knowing that I'm going to give you my best guess today for something that's I don't have perfect knowledge of, but then we have to update the plan on a regular basis, make the corrective action. And as a result of that, I can just promise you, anybody who's doing this for the first time, know that your schedule will slip. It'll be late. After every update, I've been doing this for a super long time. And after every update, it's gonna be late because something will have delayed long enough that it pushed the deadline out or the project out. That's okay. That's just life. And we, as a team, as a collective group, we make decisions to get it back on track as a part of the process.
So when those things happen, another people element here, so things will happen, things will not go perfectly. How do we make sure that when we're having those check-ins and we're resetting, et cetera, that one, that people don't beat themselves up because they can't change what has already happened. They can only change what they do from now on. And how do we make sure collectively the team attack the problem, not the people, right? So you know, we've all been there. There's been some projects where it does get really tense, and there can be a tendency for that great teamwork that you set up at the start where you brought everyone together and they know, like, and have that connection. You start to see fractures in that teamwork because they're under a bit of pressure.
This is where the project manager really has to step back in my mind. This is where you have to have the hard skin, because my job or your job as a project manager would be to protect the individual team members from me, from anybody, whether that's upper management that has unrealistic expectations or different team members, whatever that might look like. And so if I need to delay my task because I got pulled off on a customer issue, then I'll say, hey, I got pulled off on a customer issue, and this will continue to be late until somebody else gets reassigned to do this, or somebody else gets put on that customer issue and I can come back to the project. What we find is that the people on the team hold each other accountable. And so it's, if I find that it's being unrealistic, where they go, come on, Mick, you know, you can do that in only one day. You don't need 2 days or 5 days. I have to step back in and facilitate a conversation that says, well, Fred, why do you think it's only one day? Mick, why do you think you need 5 days? But in the end, if our rule is whoever's name is the owner of that task, they get to pick the duration. And let's say that Fred is your boss, Mick, and you're saying you want a week, and Fred's your boss, and Fred says, oh, he just needs to just put one day down. I'll have that, I'll foster that conversation, facilitate that conversation. But in the end, I'm going to look at you and say, Mick, how long, based on this new knowledge that you've got, how long do you really need for this task? And if you still say 5 days and Fred says one, I have done this. I'll look at Fred and say, Fred, how do I spell your last name? Because I'm going to assign you to this task because Mick's not committed to 1 day. If I put Mick on it for one day, he's going to walk out of the room going, well, I'm going to fail because I need 5.
Yeah.
So this doesn't make any sense. This is where the project manager, because that can be a difficult conversation, especially if you're inside the organization. Maybe Fred's your boss's boss, but you have to have that mindset of we as a team have to succeed. And if I let this person sabotage and just beat this other person down, then we're not gonna be successful. And I want the truth as early as possible. And so if you need 5, explain why you need 5, and I'll defend your 5. And so I think it's where the project manager has to come in and not let that person get beat up and fractured.
There's a few dynamics I'm picking up there, Clint. The first one is that ownership. So if I am able to put in my own estimate, and I can be challenged on it, but once we've been through that, I'm going to commit to it because it was my estimate, and I will take ownership and I'll commit and I'll make sure I don't let people down because I don't feel like it was just forced upon me unrealistically. The second dynamic is I'm going to say there's a thing called the Yerkes-Dodson stress performance curve that when you put a little bit of stress, it drives performance. But if you go over a tipping point, the person almost gives up and well, it just plummets, right? So the 5-day task, you might come to me and say, are you sure you can't get this done in 4 days? And what would it take to get it done in 4 days? I might be ready for that conversation. But if
Yeah.
and I'll go to another extreme. If with Parkinson's law, if you give me 20 days, it'll take me 20 days. It was a 5-day task, right? So there's another balance there. But the conversation around 5, you might push me to 4 because there's a good reason for it to be 4, not just because you want it in 4 days, but there's a good reason why. If I can deliver it in 4, it helps my teammates, etc. I'm ready to have that conversation. But if you're trying to give me 5 days work and tell me to do it in 1, I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to
No,
try.
you won't even get it in 5 now. It'll be 20.
Yeah.
I'll eventually get to it when I have nothing, no choice. But so I have a saying that durations become self-fulfilling prophecies, which I think you said was Parkinson's or
Yeah.
and that's why we always ask for realistic durations. And we say, don't give me your best guess, don't give me your worst guess. We don't want best case or worst case. We want what's most likely going to happen. And because we're going to meet on a regular basis to update the project, we're going to make the corrective action necessary. If things are going poorly, we'll give you more time. If things go better than you thought, you don't need as much time. But the key is starting off with a realistic number, because if I create, and again, I'm going to come back to, I live in the real world, and if my boss is Sam, and Sam says, Clint, I want to get that done in 10 days instead of the 20 you're asking for, I'm not going to be successful. I'm just going to beat myself up and I'm going to work 20 hours a day and still going to fail in the end. And so when I work with Sam the next time, I know that if I want 10, he's going to make me cut it in half. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for 20. So when he cuts it in half, I get my 10, right? So we get this big tug of war thing going and we end up with unrealistic schedules. So what we try to do is just be realistic in your durations. I'm going to hold you accountable, but you can change it if you get better information later. And so going back to what I said earlier, durations become self-fulfilling prophecies. If I put 20 days in a schedule for a task I really only need 10 days for. How often do I get it done in 10 days now that the schedule says 20? Never, because now
Yeah.
the schedule says 20. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it often doesn't happen in 20 because I keep thinking I got plenty of time, got plenty of time. Oh, shoot, I should have started last week. I had to deliver in 22 days.
Yeah.
So we want shorter durations that you're going to live with and adjust as we need to.
So I think this is a good segue to another thing that I wanted to get a bit curious about, which is lessons learned. I'm going to put this to you at two different speeds and dimensions. I think many organizations, they practice lessons learned at the end of a project, and you could say hit and miss affair as to whether they take action on the lessons learned, to be clear. I'm
Mhm.
talking about my own personal observations in different companies. The one thing I don't see a lot of is lessons learned happening along the project. We had a guest on the show recently that was giving this metaphor about basketball coaches and how basketball coaches call a timeout in the middle of the game and go, hang on a second, I've seen something here and it's not working because of this. What are your thoughts about how do we make lessons learned actually impactful? So the first one I mentioned is where people go around and they talk about what went wrong, but they take no action on it. Secondly, how do we make lessons learned a bit more timely so it can impact this project, not the next project?
I think that's an excellent point and one that I've never actually had brought up before. So usually in experience says what you've seen, which is we call them after action reviews, but they happen at the end. Now, the benefit we have on those is oftentimes the next project team that's doing a similar project is a part of the after action review so that we're giving, hey, here's what worked, here's what didn't. So think about that as you launch your project. So it's not completely at the end, it doesn't matter. It's here's what we did, here's what didn't work well. Think about that as you're building your plan that you're now launching a very similar type project and going off and doing. I think it's a great idea, though. I love that analogy of the coach calling a timeout. I, but to your point, here I've seen something. Well, then the project manager or somebody has to have seen something that
Yeah.
says, "Here's what we need to do better or different." And I think that's also where the manager, the project manager, has to step in and say, this we failed 3 tests we've never failed before. Something is wrong. Something is different than it ever has been before. And in the military, they would actually pause all operations. They do that all the time now. When they have a helicopter crash, they'll have a 3-day shutdown while they do their deep dive into what's going on. Luckily, the projects I work on aren't life impacting like that. But you do need to have, I think, if things are going poorly, you need to take the pause. And sometimes that's really hard to do because you're already running late and you don't really want to take the pause, but you need to take that pause to figure out what we can do better. Do we need a different approach? Do we need to attack this a different way in order to get better at it?
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. All right, Clint. So we've been going for a while now. It's been really interesting. We've unpacked a lot of things, and what I've loved along the way is everything kept on coming back to people. Everything kept on. So you can have a perfect project management process and the best tools in the world, but everything that Clint has shared with us today came back to the emotions of a human being and whether they're motivated, whether they're committed, whether they have a connection with the other human beings that they're working with. Everything came down to that, and to remember that it's a human being that wants to go and play with their kids on the weekend and not be working and slaving away because something went wrong at work this week where they got let down or whatever the case may be. So I think we've hit the mark, Clint, that we said we're going to talk about this difference between leading people and managing a project. And I think we've nailed it, is to remember that all businesses are people businesses. And if we forget that, it's at our peril. It'll be at the peril of the business and it'll be at the peril of the project. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights. I'm going to go now to our rapid round. These are the same 4 questions we ask all of our guests. So what's the one thing you know now, Clint Padgett, that you wish you knew when you were 20?
I think it's okay to make mistakes. Perfection isn't ideal, but I think the saying is that perfection is the enemy of good enough. And I'm not saying we should just take shortcuts. So what I am saying, I wish I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self, the mistakes where you grow. And it's where you're going to learn, and you probably won't do that again. When you're a toddler and you're a parent, and you tell them don't stick this this paper clip in the electric outlet and they do it anyway. And like, okay, that hurt. You won't do that again, will you? Right. You have to learn through
Yeah.
the mistakes. And I think that it's okay to make mistakes. And for me, at least, it was work as hard as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Focus on it and work. Nobody can, you can't change how smart you are. You can't change your IQ. But what you can control is how hard you work at something. And nobody is ever going to outwork me. So that was, I think, what I would like to go back and tell my 20-year-old self is just work hard.
Yeah. Well done. Love it. What's your favorite book?
This one is tough. I really like Crucial Conversations by Joseph Grenny. It's a great book, and it's to me, things come down to conversations. I'm a big conversation guy, and I think conversations are so super important. And unfortunately, today this happened before the pandemic set in, but boy, the pandemic sure exacerbated things. And that is, I'm a big fan of conversation because it allows us to not make mistakes in how we communicate. So
Yeah.
I think Crucial Conversations is great.
Yeah. Great pick. Love it. What's your favorite quote?
So my favorite quote is I think it's by George Bernard Shaw, and it says the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know if you guys play this, but when I was a kid, we played a game called Telephone. And if you didn't play the game, it's like five kids in a room, and the first kid has a secret. He whispers to the second kid, and it whispers it on down the line. And of course, the fun of the game is what comes out of kid number five is not remotely close to what kid number one said, right? Because the secret just kept getting changed. Well, unfortunately, that happens in the business world as well. As a leader, I have a message that I send out, I think, in a very succinct way, but how did the person hear that? Were they having a good day or a bad day? Because how do I define my terminology? Maybe different than the way you define your terminology. So rather than always defaulting to one-way communications, again, I come back to conversation. What would happen is even in a telephone game, if the second kid could look back at the first kid and go, okay, you said turn left. Do you mean turn left like right now at the McDonald's or the next traffic light? By asking these clarifying questions through this dialogue, now my message gets passed down in a way that's consistent, and I have a much higher probability that my message is received in the way that I intended it to be delivered.
Yeah, I like that. And the element of asking better questions along the way. We've got to share with you there, Clint, that with this concept, as you call it, telephone, for whatever reason in Australia, it was called Chinese Whispers. I have no idea, but
I've heard that. Yeah.
it was the same game. And in a business now, I'm going to take it to the business setting. I've seen examples where not only like by the time it got to the seventh person, not only had the message changed, it had somehow actually reversed. Like a message of we're going to go in this direction had somehow gone where in no circumstances going to do this. It's like I'm not exaggerating here.
Yeah.
That's how severe it can get with this way that the communication gets skewed. All right, brilliant. Now, finally, you've shared so many wonderful things. There's going to be people that are really interested in everything you've shared here around project success, around the project success method, around how teams triumph and this word commitment. There's going to be people that want to know more, Clint. How do people find you if they would like to have a conversation with you or take advantage of your services?
Yeah. So the books are on Amazon. Like you said earlier, the Project Success Method, and the second was How Teams Triumph. They're both available on Amazon. You can reach me on LinkedIn. It's Clint.Padgett. And then you can reach us at projectsuccess.com as well. Any of those will work.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Clint. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks, Mick. I appreciate you having me.